The golden doors of the gala open and Amara, crowned, crosses the hall with three emerald green-eyed children who catch Ethan's perplexed gaze. He feels his legs weaken when he recognizes who they really are. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The May sunshine poured through the windows of the presidential suite at the Four Seasons in Greenwich, Connecticut, casting a golden glow over Amara Johnson's cocoa-brown skin. At 25, the newly graduated jewelry designer from the Fashion Institute of Technology stood before a full-length mirror, her mother adjusting the intricate lace detailing on her Vera Wang wedding gown. "You look breathtaking," whispered Darlene, gently arranging the tulle veil over Amara's perfectly defined black curls. "Ethan is going to faint when he sees you." Amara smiled, her heart fluttering with anticipation. In just 2 hours, she would become Mrs. Ethan Mills, wife to the heir of one of New York's most prestigious financial dynasties. A man who claimed to love everything about her, her rebellious creativity, her unwavering optimism, and her extraordinary talent for transforming simple metals into wearable art. Her phone vibrated on the vanity. Amara's hands trembled slightly as she reached for it, expecting a romantic message from her soon-to-be husband. The text message glowed on the screen. "I can't marry you today. A black wife and mixed-race children would ruin my image at Ethan Mills Investments. The board made this clear yesterday. I'm sorry." Amara read the message 7 times, her vision blurring around the edges. Her breathing became shallow as she tried to process the words that were destroying not just her $200,000 wedding but the entire life she had planned, including the 8-week-old baby growing in her womb, news she had been saving to reveal during their honeymoon in Bora Bora. "Mom," she whispered, her voice barely audible as she extended the phone. Darlene took it, her eyes scanning the screen before letting out a muffled cry. "That cowardly bastard." Within the hour, as 200 guests waited in St. Mary's Cathedral, the wedding planner made the announcement. Whispers spread like wildfire through the assembled crowd. In the front pew, Ethan's parents exchanged barely disguised looks of relief before hurriedly slipping out through a side door. That evening, as Amara huddled in the bathroom of the suite, still wearing her wedding dress, the hotel receptionist called. "Miss Johnson, Mr. Mills is in the lobby demanding to see you." Amara's heart constricted. Part of her wanted to refuse, to hide away from the man who had just shattered her world with a text message. But another part, the part that still couldn't believe this was happening, needed to see his face. "Tell him I'll be down in 5 minutes," she said, her voice hollow. In the golden-lit lobby of the Four Seasons, Ethan Mills looked immaculate in his Armani suit, as if he hadn't destroyed someone's world hours earlier. His carefully styled blonde hair and square jaw reflected 30 years of privilege as the heir to a New York financial dynasty. "I need the ring back," he said coldly as soon as Amara approached. "It's been in the Mills family for 4 generations." Amara stared at him, struggling to reconcile this callous stranger with the man who had proposed to her beneath the cherry blossoms in Central Park just 9 months ago. "You sent me a text message," she finally said, her voice breaking, "on our wedding day." "It was better this way." He sighed as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Honestly, Amara, you never belonged in my world. Wall Street has no place for someone like you." "Someone like me?" she asked, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "You're talented, of course, but naive about how real power works. My father showed me the numbers. We'd be losing conservative investors worth hundreds of millions." He extended his hand, palm up. "The ring, please." Amara slowly slid the 5-carat diamond off her finger and placed it in his outstretched palm, feeling as if she were surrendering a part of herself along with it. "Consider this a favor," he added, pocketing the jewel. "You could never have managed the lifestyle I've built. You're inadequate for it." The word inadequate echoed in her mind as she watched him walk away, his posture relaxed as if he'd merely concluded a minor business transaction rather than abandoned his pregnant fiancée. 3 weeks later, Amara vomited in the tiny bathroom of her new apartment in the Bronx, the only place she could afford to rent with her nearly depleted savings after paying off the non-refundable wedding deposits. Her phone rang. The obstetrics clinic. "Miss Johnson, we have your ultrasound results," the nurse said. "We're seeing 3 distinct gestational sacs. Congratulations, you're expecting triplets." The edges of Amara's world darkened. Triplets. 3 babies. Alone. In the weeks that followed, reality settled like hardening concrete. The 1-bedroom apartment cost $1,800 a month. Her health insurance covered only the basics. Her job as a sales associate at Macy's paid $14 an hour, insufficient to support 1 person, let alone 4. "How am I going to raise 3 children alone when I can barely afford the rent?" she whispered to her reflection as she counted coins to buy prenatal vitamins at the corner Walgreens. Her eyes were sunken, her body thin except for the belly that was beginning to swell. By August, Amara worked 3 jobs: mornings at Macy's, afternoons as an administrative assistant at an accounting firm, and weekends as a waitress at Denny's. Between shifts, she sketched jewelry designs in a cheap notebook, creating pieces she could never afford to fabricate. When her first unemployment check arrived, she used every cent to buy basic goldsmithing tools at an online auction: a small torch, pliers, a used workbench. At night, when exhaustion consumed her, she worked under the light of a cheap lamp, transforming silver wire into delicate pendants she sold for $25 each to co-workers. In her 6th month of pregnancy, with her body swollen and aching, Amara was fired from Macy's seasonal staff reduction, they said, though she knew it was because she couldn't stand for 8 hours straight without fainting. That night, she cried herself to sleep on the torn sofa bed, waking at 17 minutes past 3 in the morning with sudden clarity. "They will never know what it's like to beg for love from a man who considered them insignificant before they were even born," she promised, caressing her enormous belly. "You 3 will be extraordinary not despite him, but because I refuse to be who he said I was." The next morning, Amara sold her college graduation ring for $120 and bought web domains for Triquetra Designs, symbolizing her 3 children and the triple power they represented. At a public library, she created social media accounts and began posting photos of her simple but elegant creations, each named after a powerful goddess. On December 17th, after 26 hours of labor, Amara gave birth to Zora, Zuri, and Zamir Johnson, 2 boys and a girl with golden skin and, surprisingly, emerald green eyes like their father's. When the nurse asked about the birth certificate, Amara left the father line blank. "They have everything they need in me," she stated, looking at her 3 tiny miracles. "And one day, I'll show them that the man who discarded us made the biggest mistake of his life." 15 years passed in a blur of determination, sacrifice, and increasingly impressive achievements. The small business that began at a kitchen table grew into a recognized brand, then an industry disruptor, and finally, an empire. On a bright September morning, the glass and steel tower on 5th Avenue gleamed in the Manhattan sun. On the 47th floor, Amara Johnson, now 40, adjusted the collar of her Chanel suit as she prepared for the quarterly board meeting of Triquetra Diamonds, a company valued at $1.7 billion and recognized by Forbes as one of America's most innovative. Third-quarter numbers exceeded projections by 28%, announced Bernard Klein, her CFO. The Asian market expansion is 6 months ahead of schedule, and the Resurgence collection already has an 8-month waiting list. Amara nodded, admiring the Manhattan skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her office was a monument to the journey that had brought her here. One of the first pendants she'd sold for $25 was framed in a glass box beside her first Vogue cover, featuring Beyoncé wearing her Renaissance black diamond necklace. As she turned back to the boardroom table, a calendar notification flashed on her tablet. Forbes Power Summit tomorrow night. Amara would be the keynote speaker, wearing her signature Resurgence crown, a masterpiece of black diamonds valued at $4.5 million. Little did she know that less than 3 kilometers away, Ethan Mills was adjusting his Hermes tie in his Central Park West apartment, reviewing the guest list for the same event, and feeling an inexplicable chill as he saw Amara Johnson's name among the main speakers. The tears streaming down Amara's face caught the morning light as she stumbled into her Bronx apartment, clutching her termination notice from Macy's. The cheap door slammed behind her, rattling the thin walls. 5 months pregnant with triplets, her swollen feet throbbed inside shoes that no longer fit properly, and the small of her back ached relentlessly. "Seasonal staff reduction," she whispered bitterly, tossing the paper onto the rickety table she'd found discarded on the sidewalk last month. The real reason hung unspoken in the air. No department store wanted a heavily pregnant woman struggling to stand through an 8-hour shift, scaring away customers with her occasional dizzy spells. Amara glanced around the dingy one-bedroom apartment that cost $1,800 a month, a king's ransom for what it offered. Peeling paint, temperamental plumbing, and the constant symphony of neighbors arguing through paper-thin walls. This was a far cry from the Upper East Side penthouse she'd toured with Ethan just 6 months ago, where they'd planned to start their married life. At 5 o'clock the next morning, Amara's alarm blared. Despite losing the Macy's job, she still had her afternoon position at Goldstein Accounting and weekend shifts at Denny's. She forced her swollen body from the sofa bed, which sagged so severely in the middle that she'd taken to propping it up with old textbooks. "Up we go, little ones," she murmured, cradling her growing belly as she shuffled to the bathroom. The fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows that accentuated the dark circles under her eyes. Her once vibrant complexion had dulled, and her formerly bouncy curls hung limp and untended. She'd been beautiful on her wedding day, a day that never happened. By 6:30, Amara stood at the crowded subway platform, fighting waves of nausea as bodies pressed against her from all sides. A businessman in an expensive suit, the kind Ethan wore, shoved past, his briefcase bumping her belly. "Watch it!" she snapped, protective hands flying to her stomach. The man barely glanced back, his eyes dismissive, the same look Ethan had given her in the hotel lobby, as if she were nothing more than an inconvenience to be dealt with and forgotten. 3 hours later, Amara sat at her desk at Goldstein Accounting, inputting data until her eyes burned. Mr. Goldstein, a kind older man who'd hired her despite her pregnancy, approached with concern etched on his face. "Amara, you look exhausted. Is everything all right?" She forced a smile. "Just a little tired, Mr. Goldstein. I lost my morning job at Macy's yesterday." His bushy eyebrows drew together. "That's terrible timing. How far along are you now?" 5 months, she replied, not mentioning she was carrying 3 babies instead of 1. People tended to react with horror when they learned about the triplets, as if she'd deliberately complicated her already precarious situation. That weekend, Amara's uniform strained across her growing belly as she navigated the busy Denny's dining room, carrying plates heaped with pancakes and scrambled eggs. Her back screamed in protest, but she kept moving, kept smiling. Tips were better when customers didn't see your pain. "I need another server," a well-dressed woman demanded loudly when Amara approached her table. "This one looks like she's about to give birth in my food." The manager, a harried man with perpetually coffee-stained shirts, rushed over. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Jessica will take your table." Later, as Amara counted her meager tips in the break room, the manager cleared his throat awkwardly. "Listen, Amara, maybe you should take fewer shifts until after." "I can't afford fewer shifts," she replied flatly. "I have 3 babies coming, not 1. His eyes widened in the familiar look of horror she'd come to expect. 3? "Triplets," she confirmed, tucking the $67 in tips into her worn wallet. "And their father isn't in the picture, so it's all on me." That night, Amara sat cross-legged on her bed, sketchbook balanced on her belly, drawing jewelry designs by the light of a cheap lamp she'd found at a thrift store. Her fingers moved swiftly, creating delicate filigree patterns for earrings and necklaces, designs she had no means to produce. When her first unemployment check arrived 3 days later, Amara made a decision that her former co-workers called reckless. Instead of putting the money toward rent or saving it for baby supplies, she bid on a lot of basic goldsmithing tools in an online auction. A small torch, various pliers, a used workbench, and some silver wire. "You're crazy," her former colleague from Macy's told her over the phone. "You need diapers and cribs, not jewelry tools." "I need a future," Amara replied simply. "And I'm building one." The equipment arrived in battered boxes. Amara set up her workbench in the corner of the kitchen, beneath the window that offered the apartment's only decent light. At night, after her accounting job and on weekends when she wasn't waitressing, she worked by the glow of her lamp, transforming silver wire into delicate pendants and earrings. Her first creation, a simple silver pendant with an interwoven design, she sold to the receptionist at Goldstein Accounting for $25. The second and third went to other office workers. By the end of the month, she'd sold 15 pieces, each for $25, barely covering the cost of materials, but igniting something powerful within her: hope. As her 6th month of pregnancy progressed, Amara's body rebelled. Her ankles swelled to twice their normal size, and standing for even short periods left her lightheaded. During a particularly busy Sunday brunch shift at Denny's, she fainted while carrying a tray of coffees, the mugs shattering around her as concerned customers gathered. "I'm fine," she insisted as the manager helped her to a chair. "Just need a minute." But the minute stretched into an hour, and by the end of the shift, the manager handed her a severance check and an apologetic smile. "It's too dangerous, Amara. We can't risk you or the babies getting hurt." That night she cried until no more tears would come, curled on her sagging sofa bed, surrounded by the cheap synthetic fabric that irritated her sensitive skin. The walls seemed to close in as panic clawed at her throat. 2 jobs gone, 3 babies coming, 1 bedroom, 1 struggling mother. At precisely 17 minutes past 3 in the morning, Amara jolted awake with a clarity that felt almost supernatural. Her hands rested on her swollen belly where 3 lives grew, lives that Ethan Mills had deemed unworthy of his prestigious name, his wealthy world. "They will never know what it's like to beg for love from a man who considered them insignificant before they were even born," she promised fiercely, her voice steady in the darkness. "You 3 will be extraordinary not despite him, but because I refuse to be who he said I was." The next morning, with new resolve hardening in her veins, Amara walked into a pawn shop and sold her college graduation ring, sterling silver with a small garnet stone, a gift from her mother who had worked double shifts to put her through school. The $120 it fetched went immediately to purchasing web domains for Triquetra Designs, a name she'd conceived in those quiet hours of the night. The triple symbol, representing her 3 children and the ancient power of 3 interlinked elements, would become her logo, her brand, her promise to the world and to herself. At the public library, using their free computers, Amara created social media accounts and a rudimentary website. She photographed her creations against a clean white sheet, the only decent backdrop she owned, and named each piece after a powerful goddess: Athena earrings, Sekhmet pendant, Lakshmi bracelet. Her body protested as she sat on the library's hard chair for hours, but Amara pushed through the discomfort, learning basic HTML, researching small business licenses, and studying how to build a brand with 0 capital. The librarian, noticing her determination and her condition, occasionally brought her water and allowed her to stay past the usual time limits. "You remind me of myself 30 years ago," the older woman confided. "Pregnant, alone, but unstoppable." By December, Amara's apartment had transformed into a makeshift studio. Silver wire, beads, and tools occupied the kitchen table, while baby supplies, mostly second-hand, filled the bedroom. She'd managed to secure a small business loan after being rejected by 12 banks, thanks to a women's entrepreneurship program that took a chance on her vision. On December 17th, as she finished a custom order of bridesmaid jewelry that would pay that month's rent, Amara felt the first contraction. 26 grueling hours later, with only a kind nurse holding her hand instead of the father who should have been there, she brought Zora, Zuri, and Zamir Johnson into the world. 2 perfect boys and a girl with skin the color of honey and, astonishingly, eyes as green as emeralds. Their father's eyes. When the nurse brought the birth certificate forms, her pen hovered over the father line. "Do you want to list him?" the nurse asked gently. Amara looked at her 3 tiny miracles, each wrapped in hospital blankets, their extraordinary eyes, Ethan's eyes, blinking up at the new world. In that moment, she made another promise. "No," she said firmly. "They have everything they need in me. And one day, I'll show them that the man who discarded us made the biggest mistake of his life." While Amara signed the birth certificates, leaving the father line blank, Ethan Mills closed a record-breaking deal on Wall Street, unaware that across the city, 3 lives he'd helped create were already proving him wrong about what was truly valuable in this world. The tiny wails of 3 newborns filled Amara's cramped Bronx apartment, piercing through the thin walls that hardly contained the symphony of new life. The triplets were only 2 weeks old, and Amara had already mastered what seemed impossible, nursing 2 babies simultaneously while sketching jewelry designs with her free hand. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, her body still recovering from the cesarean delivery that had been necessary when Zuri's heartbeat dropped during labor. There," she whispered, adjusting Zora and Zamir at her breasts while glancing at her sketch. A delicate silver pendant with 3 intertwined loops. "Mommy's got you. Mommy's always got you." The rickety kitchen table had been transformed into a makeshift studio, her silver wire and tools carefully arranged to maximize the limited space. A single lamp cast a warm glow over her work area, while a second-hand crib, barely large enough for all 3 babies, occupied the corner of the living room. She couldn't afford a bedroom for them yet. Her own mattress was on the floor of the apartment's only bedroom. Amara's days blurred into nights in an endless cycle of feeding, changing, soothing, and, whenever the triplets slept, creating. Sleep became a luxury she could rarely afford, catching 20 minutes here, 30 minutes there. Yet somehow, her hands remained steady as she twisted silver wire into elegant forms that belied her exhaustion. When the triplets were 3 months old, Amara bundled them into a triple stroller she'd found at a church donation center. The February snow fell in thick flakes as she pushed the unwieldy contraption toward the weekend craft market in Brooklyn, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "It's a long way to go, babies," she told them, her voice cheerful despite the biting cold seeping through her thin coat, another thrift store find. But people can't buy mommy's jewelry if they don't see it. The market stalls buzzed with activity, local artisans selling everything from hand-knitted scarves to organic soaps. Amara's table, the cheapest spot in the back corner, displayed a modest collection of silver pendants and earrings, each piece meticulously crafted during stolen moments of quiet. "3 babies and you make jewelry?" A woman with elaborately tattooed arms examined one of Amara's silver pendants. "How do you find the time?" Amara smiled, adjusting Zora's blanket. "I work while they sleep. Sometimes I don't sleep at all." By the end of the day, Amara had sold 7 pieces, enough to cover next week's diapers but not enough for the electric bill that loomed over her like a storm cloud. As she packed up her unsold inventory, snow began falling harder, transforming the city into a treacherous landscape of hidden ice and slush. The journey home took twice as long, the stroller wheels struggling through snowdrifts as the babies began to cry from hunger and cold. By the time Amara reached her building, her fingers were numb, her cheeks stinging from the wind. The elevator was broken again, forcing her to carry each baby separately up 5 flights of stairs before returning for the stroller and her jewelry case. That night, as the triplets finally slept in their shared crib, Amara counted the day's earnings. $73. The electric bill was $120. Rent was due in 2 weeks. The math was merciless. She reached for her phone, finger hovering over Ethan's number, the only contact she'd kept. One call might solve her immediate problems. One humiliating plea to the man who'd discarded her might keep the heat on. Instead, she deleted his number. "We don't need him," she whispered to the sleeping babies. "We'll find another way." In the spring, when the triplets were 6 months old, Amara developed a routine that bordered on superhuman. She nursed the babies at 5 in the morning, placed them in the crib with toys, and worked on her jewelry until they demanded attention. During their morning nap, she photographed new pieces for her slowly growing Instagram account. Afternoons were spent at the park, fresh air was free, and evenings were for filling orders that trickled in from her website. The babies were beginning to show distinct personalities. Zora, the oldest by 7 minutes, was observant and serious, her emerald eyes seeming to absorb everything. Zuri, the middle child, was sensitive and easily soothed by music. Zamir, the youngest, was intensely curious, constantly reaching for Amara's tools despite her vigilance. "Not for babies," she'd say gently, moving the silver wire out of his grasp for the 100th time. "One day I'll teach you, but not yet." When the triplets were 9 months old, Amara received a rejection letter from the 10th bank she'd approached for a small business loan. "Without collateral or an established credit history, we cannot approve your application at this time," the letter stated in impersonal type. That same afternoon, she caught Zora studying one of her silver pendants with unusual intensity, tiny fingers tracing the curves. "You like Mommy's work?" Amara asked, kneeling beside her daughter. Zora looked up, her green eyes, Ethan's eyes, shining with something that looked remarkably like pride. "Mama make," she said clearly, her first words. Tears sprang to Amara's eyes. "Yes, baby. Mama makes beautiful things, and one day we'll have our own shop where Mama can make even more beautiful things." That moment of connection fueled Amara through another month of rejections and financial tightrope walking. She stretched her grocery budget by diluting the formula, cut her own meals to 1 a day, and sold her last piece of decent jewelry, a gold bracelet her grandmother had given her, to pay the rent. The triplets' first birthday approached with a bittersweet mixture of joy and anxiety. Amara couldn't afford a proper celebration, but she stayed up all night crafting 3 tiny silver bangles, one for each child, engraved with their initials. While the babies napped on their birthday, Amara carefully arranged her newest collection on the white sheet she used as a photography backdrop. This series, inspired by her children's resilience, featured stronger lines and more assertive designs than her earlier work. As she photographed the last piece, a knock at the door startled her. Opening it revealed her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Greenberg, holding a small, slightly lopsided cake. "For the little ones," the old woman said, pressing the cake into Amara's hands. "Every child deserves something sweet on their birthday." That simple kindness unleashed the tears Amara had been holding back for months. Standing in her doorway, cake in hand, she sobbed until Mrs. Greenberg gently guided her to the couch. "It's too hard," Amara confessed, watching the triplets sleep. "I'm failing them." "Nonsense," Mrs. Greenberg said firmly. "Those babies are loved and cared for. That's success, not failure." After the modest birthday celebration, which consisted of the triplets smashing cake onto their faces while Amara and Mrs. Greenberg sang, Amara made another late-night decision. She would bring her jewelry to the upscale Brooklyn market that charged triple the table fee but attracted wealthier clientele. The gamble required her to create twice as much inventory and pay a fee she could barely afford. For 2 weeks, she worked through the nights, catching sleep in 20-minute increments when exhaustion threatened to overcome her. The result was 35 pieces, her largest collection yet. On market day, Amara dressed the now walking triplets in the cleanest outfits they owned, still second-hand but carefully maintained. The triple stroller, increasingly difficult to navigate as the children grew, was loaded with her jewelry case, diaper bag, and enough snacks to last the day. Her table at the Brooklyn market was positioned between a luxury candle maker and an artisanal chocolatier. Amara arranged her silver pieces on a black velvet cloth, purchased with her last $20, that made the metal gleam more dramatically. The triplets, contained in a portable playpen behind her table, attracted curious glances from shoppers. "Are they all yours?" asked a woman in designer sunglasses, examining a pair of silver earrings. "Yes," Amara replied, straightening Zuri's shirt. "They're my inspiration." The woman studied Amara, then the jewelry, then the babies with their striking green eyes. "These pieces are extraordinary. The workmanship is impeccable." She selected 3 pairs of earrings. "I'll take these." By midday, Amara had sold 7 pieces, more than her usual full day. The triplets, remarkably well-behaved, napped in shifts, allowing her to maintain professional composure with customers. As the afternoon progressed, a young woman in stylish but understated clothes approached the table, lingering over a braided silver cuff. "This design is incredible," she said, slipping the bracelet onto her wrist. "So simple yet sophisticated." "Thank you," Amara replied, recognizing a genuine appreciation for craftsmanship. "It's inspired by traditional Celtic knotwork, but with a contemporary twist." The woman nodded appreciatively. "I'm Jessica, by the way. I work at Elle magazine." She handed Amara a business card. "We're doing a spread on emerging jewelry designers. Would you be interested?" Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. "Absolutely. I'm Amara Johnson, founder of Triquetra Designs." Jessica smiled, glancing at the triplets. Triquetra, the triple symbol. Now I understand. She purchased the cuff and promised to be in touch. 2 weeks later, Elle magazine included Amara's braided silver cuff in a small feature on Artisans to Watch. The mention was brief, just 2 sentences and a small photo, but the impact was seismic. Her website crashed from sudden traffic and 500 orders flooded her inbox within 24 hours. Sitting on her apartment floor, surrounded by sleeping toddlers, Amara stared at her phone in disbelief. 500 orders, she whispered. How will I make 500 pieces by myself? The answer came with painful clarity. She couldn't. Not in her current setup. She needed space, equipment, and help. She needed a real studio. The next morning, Amara made the most terrifying decision of her life. She would risk everything, literally everything she owned, on a business loan secured against the only collateral she had, her future. While Amara signed papers mortgaging her meager assets to secure a loan for a small studio space in the jewelry district, Ethan Mills was being featured in Forbes as a financial wunderkind, unaware that the woman he'd deemed inadequate had just been discovered by one of fashion's most influential publications. While Amara signed papers mortgaging her meager assets to secure a loan for a small studio space in the jewelry district, Ethan Mills was being featured in Forbes as a financial wunderkind, unaware that the woman he'd deemed inadequate had just been discovered by one of fashion's most influential publications. The small industrial space smelled of dust and forgotten dreams when Amara first unlocked the door. Exposed pipes ran along the ceiling and the concrete floor was stained with mysterious marks from previous tenants. But the large windows facing north provided the perfect natural light for jewelry making, a luxury she hadn't experienced in her dim apartment. "What do you think?" she asked the triplets, now steadier on their feet at 15 months old. They toddled around the empty space, their laughter echoing against bare walls. Zora, ever the serious one, patted the wall approvingly. Zuri spun in circles in the center of the room, while Zamir immediately found a small hole in the baseboard to investigate. "I'll take that as 3 yes votes." Amara smiled, mentally calculating how to transform this empty shell into both a working studio and a child-friendly environment on her minuscule budget. By the end of the week, Amara had installed a second-hand workbench under the best window, a used sofa in the corner for the children's naps, and a safety gate separating her work area from a makeshift playpen. The triplets' toys, mostly donated by Mrs. Greenberg and other neighbors, formed a colorful island in the industrial space. "I need someone to help with orders," Amara murmured to herself, counting the growing list of backlogged pieces. The L mention had created demand she couldn't possibly fulfill alone, especially with 3 active toddlers requiring constant supervision. After posting a simple job listing at a nearby community college, Amara interviewed 5 candidates. The last was Lucia, a jewelry design student with skilled hands but limited English. "I cannot promise I'll always pay on time," Amara told her honestly, "but I promise that one day this company will be worth millions." Lucia's eyes widened briefly before she smiled. "I believe you," she said simply, examining one of Amara's intricate silver pendants. "This work? Special? Different." With Lucia working part-time, Amara established a rhythm. Mornings were for design and prototyping while the triplets played nearby. Afternoons, when the children napped, were for meeting with suppliers and photographing new pieces. Evenings after Lucia left, Amara would pack orders until midnight, sometimes sleeping on the studio floor beside the triplets' portable beds to save the commute time back to their apartment. One night, as she carefully packaged a silver necklace destined for California, Zora woke and padded over to her work table. "Mama tired," the little girl observed, her emerald eyes, so like her father's, reflecting concern beyond her years. Amara gathered her daughter into her lap. "Yes, Mama's tired, but also happy. Do you know why?" Zora shook her head, dark curls bouncing. "Because we're building something special, something that will be yours one day." By the time the triplets turned 2, Triquetra Designs had expanded enough to hire a second assistant. The small, bare studio now hummed with activity. Amara had installed proper child-proofing and created a dedicated area where the children could play safely while she worked. Her designs were being carried by 3 boutiques in Brooklyn, each piece selling for 10 times what she'd charged at the flea markets just a year earlier. "I need to know where this silver comes from," Amara insisted to a supplier who seemed puzzled by her questions. "Not just the distributor, the actual mine." "Most designers don't ask these questions," the man replied, shifting uncomfortably. "I'm not most designers," Amara stated firmly. "In my company, we know the origin of every gram of metal. If you can't provide that information, I'll find someone who can." The supplier left without an order, but Amara remained resolute. 3 weeks later, she found a supplier who specialized in ethically sourced metals and who provided detailed documentation of their supply chain. "It'll cost 15% more," Lucia warned as they reviewed the numbers. "And it's worth every penny," Amara replied. "Quality and ethics aren't negotiable." As word spread about Triquetra's commitment to ethical sourcing, a new clientele emerged, conscious consumers willing to pay premium prices for jewelry they could wear without guilt. Amara began visiting suppliers personally, even taking a trip to a small silver mine in Mexico where she insisted on seeing the working conditions firsthand. One evening, as Amara prepared for a local networking event, wearing her one presentable black dress purchased second-hand, the triplets watched with fascination. "Mama pretty," Zuri declared, touching the simple silver pendant around Amara's neck. "Thank you, sweetheart." She knelt to kiss his forehead. "You 3 be good for Miss Lucia tonight. Mama's going to meet people who might help our business grow." At the networking event, Amara circulated with quiet confidence, her portfolio of designs tucked under her arm. When she spotted Charlotte Astor, a well-known socialite whose family had deep connections in New York's luxury market, Amara took a calculated risk. Approaching the elegantly dressed woman, Amara introduced herself. "Ms. Astor, I'm Amara Johnson of Triquetra Designs. I've created something I believe would complement your style perfectly." From a velvet pouch, she withdrew a pair of silver earrings with an intricate knotwork design. "These are quite beautiful," Charlotte acknowledged, examining the craftsmanship. "They're yours," Amara said simply. "No strings attached. Wear them if you like them." I ask nothing in return. Charlotte's perfectly arched eyebrow rose slightly. "That's an unusual approach." "I believe in my work," Amara replied, "and I trust that quality speaks for itself." 2 weeks later, Vogue published photos from a charity gala where Charlotte Astor wore Triquetra earrings. The caption specifically mentioned the brand, describing the pieces as artisanal treasures from emerging designer Amara Johnson. Within hours, Triquetra's website crashed again, overwhelmed by traffic and orders. Amara, frantically calling a developer at 3 in the morning, realized she needed more than technical support. She needed proper business infrastructure. The following week, she approached the same bank that had rejected her 10 times before. This time, she brought sales projections, press clippings, and a clear business plan. "Your numbers are impressive, Ms. Johnson," the banker admitted, reviewing her documentation. "We'd like to offer you a line of credit to support your expansion." With the new funding, Amara leased a larger studio space and hired 3 more assistants. She invested in better equipment and took a small business management course online after the triplets went to bed. Her days stretched to 18 hours, her determination never wavering despite the crushing fatigue. When the triplets turned 5, they began kindergarten, allowing Amara more focused work time. After school, they came to the studio, where they now helped with simple tasks like sorting beads or placing finished pieces into velvet pouches. "Is this right, Mama?" Zuri asked, carefully sliding a silver bracelet into its packaging. "Perfect," Amara assured him, watching her children work with the same careful attention she brought to her designs. That spring, Amara secured a lease on a small storefront in Soho, a modest space compared to the luxury boutiques surrounding it, but a monumental step for Triquetra. On opening day, the triplets, dressed in their best clothes, jointly cut the ribbon while photographers from local fashion blogs captured the moment. Inside, Amara's collections were displayed on custom stands, each piece accompanied by information about its materials and inspiration. A special display near the register showcased the Origins collection, pieces specifically designed to highlight the ethical sourcing that had become Triquetra's hallmark. As the business grew to 15 employees and annual revenue of $2 million, Amara faced new challenges, balancing motherhood with business growth, dealing with suppliers who dismissed her as just a mom with a hobby, and the constant exhaustion of being both CEO and single parent. One afternoon, the school called. "Ms. Johnson, we understand you're a single mother, but the children's art show was today, and you were the only parent who missed it." The guilt crushed her as she stood in the bathroom of her studio, tears streaming down her face. After composing herself, she returned to an important meeting with a department store buyer, her professional smile masking the turmoil within. That evening, Amara received an acquisition offer, $2 million for Triquetra Designs from a larger jewelry conglomerate. "It's a generous offer," her newly hired business advisor noted. "Financial security for you and the children." Amara shook her head firmly. "I didn't build this to sell. I built it to leave a legacy for my children. Triquetra stays independent." As the Triquetra grew to 15 employees and an annual revenue of $2 million, Amara didn't know that 10 blocks away, Ethan Mills frequently walked past her boutique window, never recognizing the name of the designer he once considered inadequate for his world. 10 blocks away from Ethan's oblivious daily strolls past her boutique, Amara sat in a pristine laboratory, peering through a gemological microscope at a rough diamond. The stone caught the light, revealing its internal structure as a technician explained the latest in traceability technology. "We can now track each stone from mine to market using blockchain," the technician said, adjusting the microscope focus. "Every transaction, every hand it passes through, all recorded permanently." Amara straightened, her mind racing with possibilities. The triplets had just celebrated their 10th birthdays, and Triketra had evolved from a silver jewelry brand to a respected name in the industry. But this could be revolutionary. I want a system that traces every stone from the moment it leaves the earth to the moment it adorns someone's finger, she declared, her voice firm with conviction. Not just a paper trail, but an unbreakable digital record that our customers can access. 3 weeks later, Amara stood before a panel of investors in a sleek conference room, her presentation displayed on wall-sized screens. Her tailored blazer, no longer second-hand but custom-made, highlighted the confidence she'd cultivated over a decade of defying expectations. Triketra isn't just selling jewelry, she explained, gesturing to the striking visuals of her new Conscience collection. We're redefining transparency in an industry that has thrived on obscurity. Every diamond in this collection comes with a digital passport detailing its journey, from the mine where it was discovered to the artisan who cut it. The investors exchanged skeptical glances. The margins will be lower, one pointed out. Ethical sourcing costs more. Amara smiled, unfazed. And our customers will pay that premium gladly. Luxury without ethics is just exploitation disguised as elegance. The phrase resonated. 6 months later, Amara repeated it on stage at an international sustainability conference in Geneva, addressing an audience of industry leaders and environmental advocates. The Conscience collection had launched to critical acclaim and unexpectedly high sales, proving her theory correct. Modern consumers wanted beauty without guilt. Back in New York, the Madison Avenue flagship store opening attracted coverage from every major fashion publication. The space, designed with sustainable materials and powered by renewable energy, showcased Triketra's evolution from a small Brooklyn studio to a global luxury brand with 50 employees. The triplets, now poised and articulate 10-year-olds, proudly guided VIP guests through the store, explaining features with remarkable sophistication. Zora, with her mother's analytical mind, detailed the blockchain technology behind each piece. Zuri, naturally charming, connected emotionally with guests through stories of the artisans. Zamir, quietly observant, demonstrated the digital interface where customers could trace their jewelry's origins. "They're extraordinary children," whispered a Vogue editor to her colleague. "So poised for their age." Amara overheard the comment as she chatted with potential investors, her heart swelling with pride. The children who had once slept in a single crib in her Bronx apartment now attended the prestigious Dalton School on full scholarships, their intelligence and unique perspectives making them standout students despite their unconventional family structure. The following week, Amara sat in the headmaster's office at Dalton, listening with amazed pride as he described Zora's exceptional mathematical abilities. "She's testing at a high school level already," he explained, showing Amara her daughter's recent assessments. "We'd like to accelerate her 2 years in mathematics. She has a remarkable gift." That evening, Amara watched Zuri perform at the school's recital, his small fingers drawing such emotion from his violin that several audience members dabbed at tears. His music teacher had called him a prodigy, recommending private lessons with a Juilliard instructor who rarely accepted children so young. At home in their spacious Upper West Side apartment, a far cry from the Bronx tenement where they'd started, Zamir showed Amara an app he'd developed on his tablet. "See, Mom? It tracks the supply chain for gemstones," he explained, demonstrating how users could scan a code and view a stone's complete history. "I thought it could help with the company." Amara stared at her 10-year-old son's creation, amazed at its sophistication. "Zamir, this is incredible. Did you code this yourself?" He nodded, those emerald eyes, so like his father's, shining with quiet pride. "It's not finished yet. I want to add more features." The app, refined and expanded, would eventually become Triketra's proprietary tracking system, licensed to other ethical jewelry companies and revolutionizing industry standards. But that night, it was simply a brilliant child's gift to his mother, evidence of how far they'd all come. As Triketra's influence grew, Amara established the Triketra Foundation, channeling 15% of profits into educational initiatives in diamond mining communities. Her first trip to Sierra Leone with the triplets was both heartbreaking and hopeful, the poverty stark, but the potential for change palpable. Standing in the red dust of a small village, Amara cut the ribbon on the first Triquetra-funded school, the triplets by her side. The building, simple but sturdy, would serve 300 children from surrounding communities. "You not just buy our stones," a local miner told Amara, tears in his eyes. "You bring hope back to our village." Later, as their private plane soared above the African continent, the triplets peppered Amara with questions about mining conditions, educational disparities, and how they could help more. "Can we build schools in all the mining communities?" Zora asked, already calculating costs in her head. "Can we bring music teachers too?" Zuri added, thinking of the children who'd gathered around in fascination when he'd played his violin. "We need internet in the schools," Zamir contributed. "They should learn coding too." Amara looked at her children with wonder. They'd never known privilege as birthright the way their father had, yet they instinctively understood their responsibility to use their advantages to help others. Back in New York, Amara balanced global expansion with hands-on parenting. While conducting a video call with artisans in Africa, she simultaneously helped Zuri with his humanities project. Her days were carefully orchestrated chaos, board meetings and parent-teacher conferences, product development and science fair projects. The contrast between her corporate and family roles was stark. In her Madison Avenue office, she was Amara Johnson, visionary CEO who had transformed an industry. At home, she was simply Mom, the person who checked homework, kissed scraped knees, and chased away nightmares. That October, Amara appeared on the cover of Forbes, wearing a striking necklace from her Conscience collection, the headline reading, "Amara Johnson, Transforming Blood Diamonds into Jewels of Hope." The article detailed her journey from abandoned bride to industry revolutionary, though she'd been careful to keep Ethan's name out of the story, referring only to a fiancé who doubted her potential. When a luxury conglomerate offered $50 million to acquire Triquetra, Amara didn't even need to consider it. "Our mission isn't for sale," she told her board firmly. "Triquetra remains independent." One evening, as the triplets did homework in her office, surrounded by jewelry designs and maps of ethical mines, Amara leafed through the financial section of the newspaper. A small headline caught her eye. "Ethan Mills Investments Under SEC Investigation." She paused, studying the grainy photo of her former fiancé leaving a federal building, his expression grim. According to the article, his firm was being investigated for potential securities violations. For a moment, she felt a flicker of vindication, quickly replaced by indifference. Ethan Mills had become irrelevant to her story long ago. "Mom, can you check my math?" Zora called, pulling Amara's attention back to what truly mattered. As Triquetra became synonymous with ethical luxury, with a market valuation of $500 million, Ethan Mills faced his first lawsuit for insider trading, still unaware that the woman he'd abandoned pregnant now commanded an empire that eclipsed his own. As Ethan Mills faced his first lawsuit for insider trading, the Triquetra Tower cast its distinctive triangular shadow across Fifth Avenue. The 50-story glass and steel monument to Amara Johnson's vision had become a Manhattan landmark, its triple-knotted logo illuminated against the New York skyline, a beacon representing what determination could accomplish in 15 years. In her corner office on the 47th floor, Amara adjusted the collar of her custom Chanel suit, feeling the reassuring weight of the Triquetra pendant against her skin, a replica of the first piece she'd ever sold for $25, now crafted in platinum and diamonds. At 40, her once wild curls were styled in a sophisticated bob, with a few dignified silver strands that she refused to color, wearing them as badges of her journey. "The third quarter numbers exceeded projections by 28%, announced Bernard Klein, her chief financial officer, sliding financial reports across the polished conference table. The Asian market expansion is 6 months ahead of schedule, and the Resurgence collection already has an 8-month waiting list. Amara nodded, turning to gaze out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the Manhattan skyline, a vista that still sometimes struck her as surreal. Her office walls displayed the milestones of Triketra's ascent, that first L mention in a simple frame, the breakthrough Vogue cover featuring Beyoncé wearing her Renaissance black diamond necklace, and most recently, her selection as one of Time's 100 most influential people. "And our impact metrics?" she asked, turning back to the boardroom table where her executive team waited. Melissa Chen, head of the Triketra Foundation, tapped her tablet. 17 schools now operational across mining communities in Africa. Over 3,000 scholarships funded. The new vocational training center in Sierra Leone opens next month. Amara smiled, satisfaction warming her chest. The numbers that truly mattered weren't just on the balance sheet. They were in lives transformed, communities uplifted, and an industry reformed. "Your calendar for tomorrow," her assistant reminded her, placing a tablet before her. "The Forbes Power Summit at 7 in the evening. You're the keynote speaker." "Confirmed with the stylists," Amara replied, scanning her schedule. "I'll wear the Resurgence crown, and the triplets are excited about attending." 15-year-old Zora, Zuri, and Zamir had become poised young adults, each extraordinary in their own right. The conference room door opened as if conjured by her thoughts, and her phone rang simultaneously, the Dalton School's number flashing on the screen. "Mom!" Zora's excited voice filled the line before Amara could even say hello. "I just got my early acceptance letter from Yale. First in the class." Pride radiated through Amara as she listened to her daughter's joy. Zora, brilliant, confident, and determined, had inherited her strength and received opportunities that Amara herself had never been offered. "I'm so proud of you, my love," she replied, knowing that her children had become exactly what she'd promised on that desperate night 15 years ago. Zora was a mathematical prodigy, Zuri an acclaimed violinist who had already performed at Carnegie Hall, and Zamir a programming genius who had developed the blockchain application that now tracked the provenance of precious metals throughout the industry. That evening, in their Upper East Side penthouse with its sweeping views of Central Park, Amara helped the triplets select their outfits for the Forbes event. Looking at them, she felt a wave of emotion, Zora with the same thick curls as hers, Zuri with his radiant smile, and Zamir with his quiet intensity. All three with Ethan Mills' emerald green eyes, a constant reminder of the man whose name had never been mentioned in their home. "Mom, you should wear the black diamond crown," Zuri suggested, opening the built-in safe in her closet wall. "You think?" Amara asked, lifting the piece she had designed herself, an intricate structure of black gold set with 317 rare black diamonds, valued at $4.5 million. "Definitely," Zamir agreed, adjusting his tie with the precision he brought to everything. "They call you the Queen of Ethical Diamonds for a reason." Amara smiled, placing the crown atop her curls now elegantly streaked with silver. The mirror reflected a woman who looked nothing like the abandoned bride of 15 years ago. Now she radiated power, confidence, and a beauty that came from having survived the worst and built the best. As her private elevator descended to the waiting limousine, Amara received a notification on her phone, the final guest list for the Forbes event. She scrolled through it idly, then stopped, her finger hovering over a name she hadn't expected to see: Ethan Mills, CEO, Ethan Mills Investments. For a moment the years fell away and she was 25 again, reading a devastating text message in her wedding dress. The memory no longer carried pain, just a distant acknowledgement of a turning point, like recognizing the scar from an old wound that had long since healed. "Mom? Everything okay?" Zora asked, noticing her pause. Amara locked her phone with a decisive click. "Everything's perfect," she replied, stepping into the limousine where her children waited. "Tonight belongs to us." Across Manhattan, in his Central Park West apartment, Ethan Mills adjusted his Hermes tie before the mirror, dissatisfaction etched in the lines around his eyes. At 45, his once golden hair had dulled, with gray prominently invading his temples. His firm, Ethan Mills Investments, had weathered 3 insider trading lawsuits and a costly divorce from his wife of 10 years, a Connecticut socialite who had proven suitable but ultimately incompatible. His assistant had laid out the briefing for tonight's Forbes Power Summit, a networking opportunity he desperately needed after losing significant clients to more innovative competitors. Scanning the attendee list, his eyes caught on a name that triggered a vague sense of recognition: Amara Johnson, CEO, Triquetra Diamonds. The name tugged at his memory, but he couldn't place it. Perhaps they'd met at a previous industry event. His phone rang, another call from his legal team about the SEC investigation, distracting him from the thought. Later that evening, as their limousine glided through Manhattan traffic, Amara briefed the triplets on the evening ahead. "There will be press," she reminded them. "Stay poised. Remember that anything you say may be quoted." "We know, Mom," Zora replied confidently. "We've been doing this since we were 10. Amara smiled at her daughter's assured response. These children had grown up in boardrooms and at galas, as comfortable in 5-star hotels as they were in the mining communities they visited through the foundation. They possessed a worldliness balanced by the humility she had carefully instilled, an understanding that privilege came with responsibility. "I'm just proud to be there for your keynote," Zuri added, "the first jewelry designer ever to give the address at the Forbes Summit. And the first black woman," Zamir noted with quiet pride. As their limousine approached the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where the summit was being held, Amara felt a strange shiver of anticipation. Tonight represented another milestone, recognition not just of Triquetra's financial success but of the ethical revolution she had spearheaded in an industry once notorious for exploitation. She touched the Triquetra pendant at her throat, 3 interlocked loops representing her 3 children, the 3 promises she had made 15 years ago. They would never want for anything, they would know their worth beyond anyone's validation, and they would change the world for the better. "Ready?" she asked as the car door opened to a flurry of camera flashes. The triplets nodded in unison, and together they stepped onto the red carpet, unaware that inside the venue, Ethan Mills was about to confront the consequences of the most significant mistake of his life. While the Triquetra family made their way into the gala, a champagne glass slipped from Ethan's fingers, shattering on the marble floor as he glimpsed, for the first time in 15 years, the woman he had abandoned, now gloriously crowned with diamonds and flanked by 3 teenagers with his unmistakable emerald green eyes. While the Triquetra family made their way into the gala, a champagne glass slipped from Ethan's fingers, shattering on the marble floor as he glimpsed, for the first time in 15 years, the woman he had abandoned, now gloriously crowned with diamonds and flanked by 3 teenagers with his unmistakable emerald green eyes. The evening before the Forbes Power Summit dawned with promise and anticipation in 2 vastly different corners of Manhattan. In her penthouse office overlooking Central Park, Amara Johnson sat bathed in the golden light of sunset, fingers tapping thoughtfully against her desk as she reviewed her keynote speech. 15 years had transformed the abandoned bride into one of America's most powerful businesswomen, and tomorrow night she would address the elite of the corporate world as an equal. No, as someone many of them now aspired to emulate. "This section on overcoming adversity feels too generic," she murmured to herself, striking through a paragraph with her Mont Blanc pen, a gift from Oprah after their interview last year. "They don't need platitudes about perseverance. They need truth." She rewrote the passage, infusing it with the raw reality of those early days. The triple stroller she'd pushed through snow to sell jewelry at flea markets, the nights spent working while 3 babies slept in a single crib. Not for sympathy, but to illuminate the path she'd forged without shortcuts or safety nets. The door to her office opened, and the triplets spilled in, their teenage energy immediately filling the space. At 15, they had grown into young people who carried themselves with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and where you belong in the world. "Mom, what do you think?" Zora held up 2 dresses, one midnight blue, one emerald green. "For tomorrow night, it has to be perfect for your big moment." "The green," Zamir suggested before Amara could answer. "It matches our eyes." "That's exactly why I'm leaning toward the blue," Zora countered. "I don't want to look like I'm playing up the whole emerald eyes thing. It feels too much like we're highlighting our connection to whoever our father is." Zuri finished his sister's thought, voicing what they all occasionally wondered but rarely discussed. A brief silence fell over the room. Amara had never hidden the fact that they had a father somewhere, but she'd been selective about the details. They knew he had rejected them before birth, that he had considered them potential damage to his corporate image. The actual text message remained stored in Amara's oldest phone, preserved like evidence of a crime. Zora broke the tension by crossing to her mother's desk, proudly sliding an envelope across the polished surface. It came today, early acceptance to Yale, full academic scholarship, first in my class. Amara rose and embraced her daughter, emotion swelling in her chest. "I always knew you would do this. From the moment you built that complex mathematical model in 3rd grade, Yale never stood a chance against your brilliance." "We've all come so far, haven't we?" Zora whispered against her mother's shoulder. "Remember that apartment in the Bronx? How you used to wrap us all in one blanket when the heat went out?" "Everything I built was for you 3, Amara said, beckoning the boys to join the embrace. "To show the world, and ourselves, that we are extraordinary." Later that evening, Amara stood in her vast closet while Zuri carefully lifted the black diamond crown from its bulletproof display case. The piece, her masterwork, contained 317 rare black diamonds set in blackened platinum, forming an intricate pattern of triquetra knots that represented her children and the journey they'd shared. "You have to wear this tomorrow," Zuri insisted, his artistic sensibility appreciating the dramatic statement it would make. "The resurgence crown for your biggest speech yet." "It weighs a ton," Amara laughed, but allowed him to place it on her head. In the mirror, she saw not just the successful CEO, but the echo of that terrified pregnant woman who had once counted coins for prenatal vitamins. The crown wasn't just a $4.5 million piece of jewelry, it was a symbol of every impossible challenge she'd overcome. Across the city, in a starkly different scene, Ethan Mills faced a room full of disgruntled board members in the sleek conference room of Ethan Mills Investments. At 45, his once golden good looks had hardened into something more brittle. Success had come easily to him his entire life, but maintaining it had proven increasingly difficult as financial regulations tightened and younger, more innovative firms disrupted the market. "We've lost the Rothschild account to Goldman," reported his CFO, the words falling like stones in the tense atmosphere. "That's $300 million in assets under management, gone." "What was their reason?" Ethan demanded, loosening his tie in frustration. "They cited concerns about our recent SEC investigation, but unofficially they've indicated that our investment strategy appears outdated." Outdated. The word stung. Ethan had built his reputation on being the golden boy of Wall Street, the wunderkind who could do no wrong. Now, approaching middle age with his 3rd insider trading investigation and a costly divorce behind him, that golden veneer was tarnishing rapidly. "The Forbes Power Summit tomorrow night is our chance to make new connections," his assistant reminded him, sliding a leather folder across the table. "I've compiled profiles of key attendees. Every major CEO and investor will be there." Ethan nodded grimly, flipping through the dossiers of potential clients and partners. His finger paused briefly on a photo of a striking black woman with a confident smile. "Amara Johnson, CEO, Triquetra Diamonds," read the caption. Something about the name tugged at his memory, but before he could chase the thought, his phone rang with an urgent call from his legal team. As night fell over Manhattan, 2 vastly different preparations for the same event continued. In her penthouse, Amara helped Zamir select a tie that complemented his suit, while Zora practiced answering potential questions from business journalists, and Zuri polished his already immaculate dress shoes. "Do you think anyone important will talk to us?" Zuri wondered. "Or will they just see us as the CEO's kids?" "They'll see you as the extraordinary young people you are," Amara assured him. "The Yale-bound mathematician, the Carnegie Hall violinist, and the tech entrepreneur whose blockchain application is revolutionizing supply chain transparency." Meanwhile, in his Central Park West apartment, Ethan sat alone in his home office reviewing the Forbes Summit attendee list one more time. His attention caught again on Amara Johnson's profile. Something about her seemed oddly familiar. He clicked on the promotional video for the event, watching as various industry leaders appeared in quick cuts. For just a second, Amara flashed on screen, her smile confident, her presence commanding. An inexplicable chill ran down Ethan's spine as he paused the video on her face. Those eyes. There was something about them that triggered a memory he couldn't quite place. He dismissed the sensation, attributing it to fatigue and the stress of tomorrow's high-stakes networking opportunity. As he prepared for bed in his expansive but starkly impersonal bedroom, the interior designer's touches evident but no personal photographs or mementos visible, Ethan couldn't shake a strange sense of foreboding about tomorrow's event. In her bedroom across town, Amara stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the glittering Manhattan skyline. 15 years ago, she'd arrived in this city pregnant and abandoned, with nothing but determination and talent. Now she owned a piece of that skyline, the distinctive Triquetra Tower with its illuminated triple-knot logo visible from miles away. 15 years, she whispered to her reflection in the glass. Who would have thought we'd come so far? Behind her, the Resurgence crown caught the city lights, its black diamonds absorbing and reflecting the glow in hypnotic patterns. Tomorrow she would wear it as she addressed the very people who once might have dismissed her, just as Ethan had. While New York slept, two destinies intertwined for 15 years prepared for a collision neither could predict. Amara, now crowned with diamonds. Ethan, still blind to the true jewel he had discarded. While New York slept, two destinies intertwined for 15 years prepared for a collision neither could predict. Amara, now crowned with diamonds. Ethan, still blind to the true jewel he had discarded. The Metropolitan Museum of Art stood regally against the twilight sky, its classical columns illuminated by golden lights as a procession of limousines deposited Manhattan's elite onto the red carpet. Camera flashes erupted in rhythmic bursts, capturing arrivals for the Forbes Power Summit, the most prestigious gathering of business leaders in America. Ethan Mills stood near the entrance, champagne flute in hand, projecting the confident posture that had become second nature during 3 decades of privilege. His custom-tailored Brioni suit concealed the slight thickening of his waist, while his expertly colored hair disguised the encroaching gray. At 45, he remained handsome in the sharp, patrician way that opened doors and inspired trust among fellow members of the financial aristocracy. "The market is unstable, but I still predict a strong fourth quarter," Ethan remarked to 2 investment bankers who hung on his every word despite his firm's recent troubles. The Mills investment strategy has weathered worse storms. A sudden intensification of camera flashes at the entrance drew attention. Ethan turned casually, his champagne flute halfway to his lips, when time seemed to stop. Amara Johnson glided through the entrance, draped in a liquid gold gown that caught and transformed every beam of light. Atop her perfectly styled curls sat a crown of black diamonds that seemed to capture darkness itself, transforming it into something mesmerizing and powerful. But what froze Ethan's blood weren't the diamonds or the regal bearing she now possessed. It was the 3 teenagers walking confidently beside her. A girl and 2 boys, all with golden brown skin, dark chestnut curls, and unmistakable emerald green eyes. His eyes. The champagne flute slipped from his nerveless fingers, shattering on the marble floor with a crash that seemed distant through the sudden roaring in his ears. "Are you all right, Mills?" asked one of the bankers, startled by the uncharacteristic clumsiness. Ethan couldn't respond. His throat had closed as he watched Amara, the woman he had abandoned pregnant 15 years ago, enter the hall like royalty. Murmurs followed in her wake. "That's Amara Johnson, CEO of Triquetra. I heard she's worth nearly $1 billion. Her ethical diamonds revolutionized the industry." It can't be." "Amara?" he whispered to his associate, feeling blood drain from his face as one of the teenagers turned in his direction, revealing the same eye shape and chin that Ethan saw in the mirror daily. The master of ceremonies approached the podium, tapping the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to welcome our keynote speaker tonight, Amara Johnson, founder and CEO of Triquetra Diamonds, whose vision has transformed not only the jewelry industry, but also the lives of thousands through her foundation. Her creations adorn royalty and presidents, and her educational scholarship program has already graduated over 3,000 young people from underprivileged communities." The crowd applauded enthusiastically as Amara and the teenagers made their way to the head table. Ethan remained paralyzed, his mind processing the obvious. Those were his children, children he never knew existed, children he had rejected before they were even born. "Mr. Mills?" His assistant appeared at his side, concern etched on his face. "Are you all right? You've gone pale." "Who?" Ethan stammered, discreetly pointing toward Amara. "How much is she worth?" The assistant followed his gaze. "Amara Johnson? Forbes estimated her at $890 million last month. Triquetra surpassed Tiffany in online sales last year." "Why?" Ethan felt nausea rising. Almost $1 billion. The woman he had discarded for fear she would ruin his image was now worth nearly 5 times more than his own company. Throughout dinner, Ethan couldn't tear his eyes from the head table, where Amara conversed animatedly with Forbes editors and LVMH executives. The teenagers were poised and articulate, clearly at ease in this elite environment that he had once deemed too sophisticated for their mother. He observed Zamir, the boy whose posture and manner of gesturing were an unsettling reflection of his own. The young man suddenly looked in his direction, as if feeling the weight of his stare. Those eyes, Ethan's eyes, fixed on him with curiosity. "Mom?" Ethan heard the boy ask, his voice carrying across the hall during a lull in the music. "Why is that man staring at us like that?" Amara turned slowly, her eyes meeting Ethan's for the first time in 15 years. There was no shock in her gaze, only brief recognition followed by something worse than anger: indifference. "Some people find good manners a novelty, darling," she replied, turning her attention back to the conversation at her table as if Ethan were nothing more than a passing curiosity. The casual dismissal hit harder than outright hostility would have. For 15 years, he had been the protagonist of his own story, never considering that in hers, he might be merely a footnote, the obstacle she had overcome on her path to greatness. After dinner, during the cocktail hour before Amara's keynote address, Ethan could no longer contain himself. He approached the area where she conversed with a group of executives. "Amara," he said, his voice shakier than intended, "it's been a long time." The group fell silent. Amara turned, her face a mask of professional politeness. "Ethan Mills," she said, as if introducing a stranger to the group. "Chief Executive Officer of Ethan Mills Investments." "Could we speak privately?" he asked, aware of curious eyes watching their interaction. "I'm in the middle of discussing our Asian expansion," she replied coolly. "Perhaps another time." "Amara, please," he insisted, lowering his voice. "I didn't know about the children." Something flashed in her eyes, the first real emotion he'd seen. "How interesting," she commented, her voice calm but cutting. "You didn't care enough to ask about the pregnancy test I'd taken 2 days before the wedding." The executives around them shifted uncomfortably, but no one moved away. The drama was too fascinating. "I made a mistake," Ethan admitted, "the biggest mistake of my life." Amara regarded him for a long moment before responding. "It's funny how you feared I would ruin your image when it was precisely without you that I built an empire and 3 wonderful lives." The teenagers approached, sensing the tension. Zora, with her mother's sharp intuition, positioned herself protectively beside Amara. "Mom, is everything okay?" she asked, her voice steady but alert. "Perfectly," Amara smiled. "This is Ethan Mills, an acquaintance from the past." Zamir's eyes narrowed, studying Ethan's face with disturbing intensity. "Your eyes," the boy murmured. "They're like ours." The ballroom seemed to have gone silent around them, though the music continued playing. Ethan felt the moment crystallize, truth hovering on the edge of revelation. "Children," Amara said calmly, "this is the man who should have been your father, but decided his career was more important than our family." Cell phones began to appear discreetly, recording the moment when Amara Johnson, the darling of the business media, publicly confronted the man who had abandoned her. "I didn't know they were triplets," Ethan stammered, as if that explained anything. "You didn't know because you chose not to know," Amara responded, her voice rising slightly. "You lost the right to know them the moment you sent a text message ending our relationship on our wedding day." Zuri, always the most emotional, looked at Ethan with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "You're the guy who said a black wife would ruin your corporate image?" Whispers spread through the ballroom. Ethan paled. How did he know the exact words? "I kept the text message," Amara explained, as if reading his thoughts, "for when they asked about you." "I can make it up to them," Ethan said desperately. "I can offer them so much now." Amara laughed, a genuinely amused sound. The man who feared a black wife would tarnish his reputation now begs for attention from the mixed-race children he rejected. The executives around them discreetly backed away, but cameras moved closer. Amara Johnson publicly humiliating a Wall Street banker would be front-page news tomorrow. "I can explain," Ethan insisted. "I was young, immature, pressured by my family, and I was a 25-year-old pregnant woman, abandoned without money, family, or a place to live," Amara completed. "Different challenges, clearly." As the master of ceremonies approached to escort Amara to the stage for her keynote address, she turned to Ethan one final time. "Enjoy the speech, Ethan. I'll be talking about how rejection can be the greatest gift when it comes from someone whose approval would have limited your potential." While Amara ascended to the stage, greeted by thunderous applause, Ethan remained rooted in place, suddenly aware that the true power in the room belonged not to him or his fellow financial elites, but to the woman whose potential he had so drastically underestimated, and the 3 extraordinary young people who carried his eyes but not his name. While Amara ascended to the stage, greeted by thunderous applause, Ethan remained rooted in place, suddenly aware that the true power in the room belonged not to him or his fellow financial elites, but to the woman whose potential he had so drastically underestimated, and the 3 extraordinary young people who carried his eyes but not his name. The spotlights followed Amara as she approached the podium, the black diamond crown capturing and fracturing the light into 1,000 glittering points. The ballroom fell silent, all eyes fixed on her commanding presence. All eyes except Ethan's. His remained locked on the 3 teenagers who had moved to a reserved table near the stage, watching their mother with unmistakable pride. His children. 3 lives he had rejected with a single text message. Amara's voice, strong and measured, filled the vast space. 15 years ago, I stood in a hotel room in a wedding dress, reading a text message that said I wasn't good enough, that I would damage someone's precious image. Her eyes briefly found Ethan's in the crowd. Tonight, I stand before you as living proof that rejection can be the greatest catalyst for success. when it comes from someone whose approval would have limited your potential. The audience erupted in applause, unaware of the personal history behind her words. As Amara continued her speech about ethical business practices and authentic leadership, Ethan felt increasingly disconnected from the surrounding celebration. The cocktail in his hand remained untouched, his thoughts consumed by what he had thrown away. After the keynote address, during the dessert reception, Ethan could no longer contain himself. He maneuvered through the crowd, ignoring recognition from colleagues and potential clients, his focus singular and desperate. Amara stood surrounded by admirers, the triplets now mingling confidently with business leaders nearby. "We need to talk," he said, approaching her directly, privately. Amara regarded him coolly. "I'm not sure we have anything to discuss, Ethan. They're my children too," he insisted, lowering his voice. "I have a right to know them." Something hardened in her expression. "A right? Rights are earned, Ethan. You forfeited yours 15 years ago with 6 words. I can't marry you today. Remember?" Several heads turned at her slightly raised voice. Ethan felt sweat beading at his hairline. "It was a mistake," he pleaded. "I was young, pressured by my family, by the board, and I was alone, pregnant, and abandoned." She cut him off. "Yet somehow I managed to raise 3 exceptional human beings while building a billion-dollar company. Interesting how differently we handled pressure." The triplets approached, sensing the tension. Zuri, the violinist with the sensitive soul, spoke first. "Is everything okay, Mom?" Amara's expression softened as she turned to her children. "Mr. Mills here feels we have unfinished business." "I want to know my children," Ethan said directly to them, his voice cracking slightly. "I've missed 15 years, but—" "We're not yours to know," Zora interrupted, her analytical mind immediately cutting to the heart of the matter. "DNA doesn't make you our father. Presence does. Commitment does. Love does." Ethan flinched at the precise articulation of his failure. Zamir, the quietest of the 3, studied him with those unsettlingly familiar green eyes. "You said a black wife and mixed-race children would ruin your image," Zamir stated. Not a question, but an accusation. "Did you know Mom kept your text message? She showed it to us when we asked why we didn't have a father." Several nearby executives gasped quietly, smartphones discreetly recording the confrontation. Ethan's professional reputation, already damaged by SEC investigations, would not survive this public revelation of his racial prejudice. "I was wrong," Ethan admitted, desperation evident in his voice. "Clearly wrong. Look at you 3. You're extraordinary. I want to be part of your lives." "Convenient timing," Zora observed coolly. "Now that we're successful, prestigious, accomplished, would you have wanted to know us if we weren't Yale-bound or Carnegie Hall performers?" The crowd around them had grown, pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. Amara allowed the confrontation to continue, giving her children the space to express 15 years of unasked questions. "I can provide for you," Ethan offered weakly. "Connections, opportunities." "We don't need your connections," Zuri interrupted, unusually assertive for the normally gentle middle child. "Mom had dinner with the Obamas last month. We spent spring break at Richard Branson's island. And my app already has venture capital funding," Zamir added quietly. $2 million in the first round." Ethan looked stunned, his perception of what he could offer these children crumbling before his eyes. They weren't desperate for his approval or resources. They already had everything he might have given them, and more. "I want to make amends," he tried again, aware of the growing audience. "Please, just give me a chance to know you." The triplets exchanged glances, having one of those silent conversations that only multiples can manage. Finally, Zora spoke for them all. "We'll consider it," she said carefully. "Not for your sake, but for ours. We have questions only you can answer." Relief flooded Ethan's face. "Thank you. Anything, anytime." "Sunday," Zuri interjected. Lunch, just the four of us." Amara watched this exchange with composed neutrality, neither encouraging nor discouraging their decision. Her posture communicated absolute confidence in her children's judgment, a stark contrast to Ethan's obvious desperation. "I'll be there," Ethan promised. "Where? We'll send details," Zamir cut him off, the dismissal clear in his tone. As the triplets moved away to rejoin the gala, Ethan turned to Amara, who had remained silent during the exchange. "Thank you for not interfering," he said quietly. "I don't interfere with their decisions," she replied evenly. "I've raised them to think for themselves, to assess people's true value rather than their superficial worth, a skill I wish I'd had 15 years ago." Around them, the crowd had thinned, giving them an unusual moment of privacy in the crowded ballroom. "You've done an incredible job with them," Ethan admitted, genuine awe in his voice. "They're remarkable." "Yes," Amara agreed simply. "They are." "I truly didn't know you were pregnant," he said, needing her to believe at least this truth. Amara's expression remained impassive. "You never asked about the doctor's appointment I had 2 days before the wedding, the pregnancy test I'd told you I was getting. You were too busy ensuring your family's approval of the prenuptial agreement to inquire about becoming a family yourself." The precision of her memory struck him like a physical blow. She was right. She had mentioned a doctor's appointment, and he had been distracted by his father's demands regarding the prenup. "I'll make it right," he promised weakly. Amara laughed, the sound devoid of bitterness, merely amused. "You still don't understand, do you? There's nothing to make right. We don't need your redemption, Ethan. We thrived without you. The children are giving you an opportunity to know them out of curiosity, not necessity." She adjusted her diamond crown slightly, the gesture unconsciously regal. "Sunday will be interesting. They'll have questions about your family medical history, your genetic background, practical matters. Don't mistake scientific curiosity for emotional longing." With that parting wisdom, she turned to join a group of international executives who had been waiting patiently to speak with her. Ethan stood alone, surrounded by New York's elite, yet suddenly aware of his profound isolation. As the gala continued around him, Ethan observed from a distance as Amara and the triplets moved through the crowd with effortless grace, collecting business cards, sharing laughs with celebrities, and discussing global markets with finance ministers. They operated as a unit, a family forged through adversity into something unbreakable. While executives discreetly recorded his humiliation on their smartphones, Ethan realized the devastating truth. It wasn't just fortune and status he had lost by abandoning Amara, but the chance to be part of the extraordinary lives that now observed him with a mixture of curiosity and pity. While executives discreetly recorded his humiliation on their smartphones, Ethan realized the devastating truth. It wasn't just fortune and status he had lost by abandoning Amara, but the chance to be part of the extraordinary lives that now observed him with a mixture of curiosity and pity. The next morning, Ethan's face appeared on every digital tabloid alongside Amara's. "CEO confronts billionaire who abandoned her pregnant," screamed the New York Post headline. "Diamond Queen exposes ex-fiancé who rejected her for being black," declared TMZ. Ethan's phone had been ringing continuously since 5 in the morning, his publicist frantically trying to contain the damage. As markets opened, Ethan Mills' investment stock plummeted 11% in the first hours of trading. Meanwhile, Triquetra's social media accounts gained hundreds of thousands of new followers overnight, with consumers pledging support for Amara's ethical business practices, both professionally and personally. In her Upper East Side penthouse, Amara stood at the kitchen island, flipping pancakes while the triplets set the marble countertop for breakfast. The atmosphere felt charged with unasked questions, the previous night's confrontation hanging in the air between them. "Why did you never tell us about him?" Zora finally asked, breaking the silence as she placed glasses of fresh orange juice around the island. Amara sighed, setting down the spatula. "Because I wanted you to grow up knowing your worth, without the shadow of his rejection. "Did he really say those things?" Zuri asked, always the most sensitive of the three. "About us ruining his image?" Amara nodded, sitting down with them. "Yes, and for years those words destroyed me. But then I realized they only had power if I allowed them to." "He seemed desperate last night," Zamir observed, always analytical. "Like he was seeing something he wanted badly but knew he couldn't have." "Regret is a powerful emotion," Amara responded, spreading butter on her pancakes. "But it comes too late for some things." The intercom buzzed. The doorman announced, "Miss Johnson, Mr. Ethan Mills is here. He insists on seeing you." The triplets exchanged glances across the table. "Should we meet him properly?" Zora suggested, for scientific curiosity at least. Amara studied her children, each strong, confident, curious. Perhaps it was time. "Send him up," she instructed the doorman. Minutes later, Ethan stepped out of the private elevator looking disheveled and sleep-deprived, carrying 3 silver-wrapped boxes. His perfectly tailored suit from last night had been replaced by hastily donned business casual attire, his hair uncombed. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, his eyes drinking in the luxurious apartment with its panoramic views of Central Park. "I brought gifts." "I'm sure they cost a fortune," Amara commented dryly, "but my children don't need expensive presents." "They're shares," Ethan explained, placing the boxes on the coffee table. "In my company, 1/3 each. I want them to have their rightful place as my heirs." Zora, always the most direct, stepped forward. "Mr. Mills, I appreciate the gesture, but I need to clarify something. Harvard didn't accept me because I'm your daughter. They didn't even know that. Yale didn't accept me because of your last name or connections. I achieved all this on my own merit. And I already have my own tech company valued at $30 million, Zamir added calmly. "I developed software that tracks the precious metals supply chain. Triketra was my first client, but now Tiffany, Cartier, and Bulgari use it too." Ethan blinked, visibly shaken. "And while you were busy building your empire based on questionable investment practices," continued Zuri, the gentlest of them trying to sound diplomatic, "Mom built a company that doesn't just generate profit but transforms lives. Our scholarships have graduated 3,000 students." "It's ironic," Amara added, crossing her arms, "that you, who feared I wouldn't fit into your Manhattan world, now could barely afford the tuition at Dalton School where our children studied thanks to the empire I built with my own hands." Ethan ran his hands through his hair, clearly disturbed. "I'm not here for your money. I'm here because I want to know my children." 15 years too late," Amara responded. "Please," he begged, "let me be part of their lives now. I can help with connections, opportunities." "Connections?" Zamir laughed, incredulous. "Mom has Oprah's personal number. We had dinner with the Obamas last year." Ethan seemed to shrink before them. "I really messed up, didn't I?" "Completely," confirmed Amara, no rancor in her voice, just the statement of a fact. "But I'm not preventing them from knowing you now if they wish. They're old enough to decide." The triplets exchanged glances again, having one of those silent conversations that only multiples can have. "We can have lunch next Sunday," Zora finally suggested. "To talk. Just the 4 of us." Ethan nodded, gratitude flooding his face. "Thank you. Thank you so much." When he turned to leave, Amara walked him to the door. "You know," he said quietly, "not a day goes by that I don't think about what I threw away. Not just you, but all of this." Amara studied him, the man who once had the power to destroy her, now looking small and defeated in her elegant foyer. "Sometimes the greatest gift a man can give is his absence," she responded without cruelty. "Because it was in the void you left that I discovered I wasn't just enough. I was always extraordinary." When the door closed behind Ethan, Amara returned to the living room where her children waited. 3 brilliant young people who represented not what she had lost, but everything she had gained. "Are you okay?" she asked, embracing all three together. "We are," Zuri answered. "After all, we have you." That afternoon, while Ethan Mills returned to his empty apartment to contemplate the superficial empire he had built at the cost of everything that truly mattered, Amara Johnson climbed to the helipad on the roof with her children. The Triquetra helicopter waited to take them to their beach house in the Hamptons. As the aircraft rose above Manhattan, Amara looked out the window, observing the city where she had arrived with nothing but dreams and determination. The weight of the black diamond crown in her bag was a reminder, not of status or wealth, but of the strength she had discovered when everything had been taken from her. She had transformed abandonment into autonomy, rejection into reinvention, and pain into power. And in the process, created not just a diamond empire, but a dynasty of unconditional love that no fortune in the world could buy. From the helicopter, the Triquetra Tower stood proud among Manhattan's skyline, its distinctive triple-knot logo illuminated even in daylight, three intertwined loops representing the three children who had been her strength, her purpose, and ultimately, her greatest achievement. Zamir pointed to a sleek building several blocks from their tower. "That's his company headquarters," he noted, his tone neutral. "Does it bother you?" Amara asked. "Knowing he's been so close all these years?" Zora shook her head. "It makes our story more powerful. We've been succeeding in his shadow without him even knowing." "Sunday will be interesting," Zuri mused. "What do you even say to someone who rejected you before birth?" "Whatever you want," Amara assured them. "Your relationship with him, if you choose to have one, is yours to define." As the helicopter banked toward Long Island, leaving the city behind, Amara felt a sense of completion. The confrontation that she had sometimes imagined during those desperate early years had finally happened, but instead of vindication, she felt only peace. Ethan Mills had become irrelevant to their happiness long ago. The truth she had discovered in 15 years of building something from nothing was that the people who walk away from you create space for miracles to enter. In rejecting her, Ethan had inadvertently freed her to become someone far greater than the woman who would have been satisfied with merely being Mrs. Mills. "Mom," Zora said, interrupting her thoughts, "are you going to wear the crown to the UN address next week?" Amara smiled at her daughter. "I think so. It reminds me of how far we've come." What had begun as a desperate promise in a Bronx apartment had manifested into reality beyond her wildest dreams. The triplets were extraordinary not despite their father's rejection, but because of their mother's unwavering belief in their worth. And that, Amara thought as the Manhattan skyline receded behind them, was the most valuable legacy of all. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.